Al, we got to do this podcast before your body falls apart
Yeah, no kidding.
because it is just going to heck with you.
I've gotten 2 separate cramps in like each foot. It makes no sense.
Feet are bad.
Feet are bad. They should
That's
do
my
better.
hot take. Feet are bad.
Feet are bad. Game Boy's tooth fell out. We're just having all kinds of crazy times in my house.
It's wild times in the Al house.
To be fair, his tooth was supposed to fall out.
Yeah, you didn't like punch him and knock it out or something, or he didn't like fight Maxwell and knock it out.
Yeah,
He's a bab.
He's a bab. He lost his bab tooth.
Yeah, you gotta go put it under your pillow and wait for the kitty tooth fairy to come.
Bring him catnip.
Yes.
Drugs.
Anyways, hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Seasonal Anime Checkup OVA. It's a podcast where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. Hello, I'm Jared, joined as always by Doc Al and Lady M.
Hello.
This is episode number 271 of this here podcast. The first episode of March. I know, very much time. Exactly.
Oh my god, this year's flying.
I mean, the last few years have flown.
Okay, that's fair.
Despite global events.
Yeah.
Time just flies.
When you're not having fun.
No.
Yeah.
Either way, we're gonna have just a little chit chat this week.
Yep.
Little low key episode. Not about the show low key or the wrestler low key. That would be a very much different podcast. Or our former friend low key.
He's still our friend. He's
still our friend.
He's not on this plane anymore.
Yes. The ghost of Loki.
The ghost of Loki who hangs out in the box.
There's too many Lokis out there and about.
Yeah. At least mine was the good one.
And to be fair, all of them are
Yeah, mine was also
so it's fair that the name exists. Either way, we're gonna have a little chit chat because this discussion has popped up again recently.
Mm-hmm.
What's the deal with game reviews?
Okay.
This kind of came about again with the release of one Elden Ring. I know, shocking that discourse is happening around a Souls game.
What?
Which, like, we're not going to talk about that kind of discourse or anything, but, you know, it is an interesting conversation about, like, you know, how do we approach game reviews in 2022? Like, how do we approach them nowadays when, you know, video game outlets aren't the biggest thing that provide video game news or impressions or anything anymore, and that's the way it's been for like almost like a decade now. You would basically say, right?
Mm-hmm.
It ain't the 90s anymore where, you know, you go to the magazine store or your local grocery store and pick up your favorite video game magazine and be like, oh, I gotta read the reviews and see what game is good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you could just go on the internet and look and just type into the Google machine just people who talk about video games, and a billion people will pop up and tell you their own opinions about video games and what games you should play and buy and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
The authoritative voice of reviews is in a weird place, I guess, is kind of the thesis of this conversation.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Well, thank you. I came up with that on the cuff. Off the cuff?
Off the cuff.
In between the cuff. That's my new phrase.
Nice.
I'm going to read you a series of tweets from one Jeff Gersman of the Giant Bomb,
Okay.
who's been a big proponent of the idea that, like, game reviews don't matter anymore.
Right.
This coming out of, like, the Elden Ring stuff, but he tweeted 2 tweets, and I quote, "Even the biggest enthusiast publications reach a fraction of the overall gaming audience, and at this point, a lot of that audience makes purchasing decisions well before a game launches. Day 1 reviews are probably not the best way to provide useful coverage to your audience. They only serve the worst parts of your audience, the scorekeepers, the fanboys, the people who just want numbers they can throw around on social media or message boards and endless, pointless arguments. It's well past that time to leave those people behind."
I think that's really fair.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what it was recently, but there was a game that I was like seeing stuff about on Twitter, and completely unrelated to anything that was going on, somebody was just like, oh yes, you mean this game is a masterpiece compared to like the new Horizon? I'm like, it has nothing to do with it. And like they screenshotted like reviews. I'm like, this is completely unrelated, and they didn't call it a masterpiece. What are you doing? What are you doing there, buddy? But it's just like, I guess like a match for lack of a better word, of like, my game's better than yours because it got a 98. It's like, oh cool, what does that even mean?
I mean, that's just the way that's
Oh,
been since the
forever,
beginning of reviews, unfortunately.
forever.
Like, it feeds into, the console war stuff and all that sort of stuff. I
It
think
does, but I think he's right that
yeah, yes, yes,
it
yes.
feeds that still.
I think one of the big things that has also really hurt this is the growth of review aggregate websites
Yes.
like Metacritic, like OpenCritic, all those sorts of stuff that basically just boil down a game into a single number.
Yep.
And you can go so far to even criticize it in the fact that, like, some publishers are basically putting so much weight into that number that, like, the developers' bonuses are tied to Metacritic scores and all that sort of
Right.
stuff,
Which is
which is
insane.
super gross and all that sort of stuff. But, like,
Yeah.
the idea that, like, I think there's positives and negatives for those kinds of sites and everything, because, like, obviously they give you a concise, look at how a bunch of different publications are looking at a specific game, and you can go through and look at different reviews in an easier way than going out and searching them by yourself.
Right.
Like, that is a very good tool to have. But the way that it becomes weaponized by a lot of, like, fans and just people on the internet, that is like, oh, well, this game just means this number, that means it's good or bad.
Or even review bombing.
Right, that too.
Like that can completely change what a score is based on like, oh man, somebody's mad about one little thing and now they've set up like a subreddit to go after this one game. Like, okay. Or like people just throwing out like, I don't know, I haven't played it, but it's good. 10 out of 10. Like, oh, okay. Cool, I guess.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. All right. So like it can be artificially inflated or deflated very easily.
But I think
That's on the user side though.
yes, I do think the idea of day one reviews is definitely a holdout of, the old days.
Yes.
And there's truth to what he says about, people kind of have their minds made up about a lot of game purchases that they're going to buy well before, the game comes out.
Right.
And a lot of times they'll just go to those reviews to reaffirm that I'm making the right decision here. Regardless, if they actually really, like, dig into the review, or they just basically go, well, this has a good score, so I'm making the right purchasing decision, so, kudos to me. I am a smart human being and all this, or, whatever you want to say. I mean, there's definitely times where, like, I'll be very, like, cautious about a game and look to review scores when it comes out and be like, okay, maybe this is something that I want to pick up, or if it's not, then like, okay, maybe I can hold off on this, maybe for a sale, or just not get it at all. Like, there is definitely still merit to reviews and all that sort of stuff, but do we need publications essentially kind of doing the same thing that a lot of developers have ended up doing themselves, and that, like, reviewers end up crunching a lot just to get reviews out day one?
Right.
And it's a bad practice to have.
Well, and especially with like a lot of games needing patches now, like day one release, like you're not really getting the full experience by doing it that way. And they're like killing themselves to try and get everything out in time. And even then they're like, oh yeah, I haven't even gotten to finish it, but here you go. Here's my review. It's like, you weren't given enough time to play this. And so I don't know that you were really able to like come away with a well-rounded review of it.
And that can be on two different sizes, because a lot of times publishers will just not give you a game out in time.
Correct.
But also the idea that, like, we have to have these reviews out day one because we got to get those website clicks, we got to get that ad revenue, is also another side of this that's like, it's not good. You're just, you're doing the thing that you constantly are criticizing developers for, but you're doing it in a way that, like, a lot of people just aren't going to talk about because they don't understand that experience or anything.
Right.
So it's a very weird double-edged sword in the grand scheme of all this. And it sucks because, like, reviewers shouldn't have to like kill themselves just to put out a review that people are going to read once and then forget about.
Right.
Because that's like another weird thing that you have to, look at when it comes to game reviews is that they are a moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
They are for that game of that, specific moment where like, it's the day one version or anything. Like a lot of times reviews don't go back and update it for like to talk about like, okay, well they patched this, and this, and this, changes the experience or makes it better and all this sort of stuff. There are some some publications that do that, and
Mm-hmm.
for some games those are warranted, but for a lot of games,
Usually people read it day one and then never look at it again unless it's very controversial, in which case it gets a little
bit more traction. Correct? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Like there was that one like Spider-Man one that I remember got traction.
So it just makes it again a weird thing of like, who are these for
What's the point?
nowadays? Like, I feel like a lot of times you're going to get more nuanced discussion once a game's out for a while, which is true
Right.
for a lot of things, obviously.
Yes.
And a lot of times that comes in the form of like, videos, podcasts, all that sort of stuff. There is still, you still get a lot of like written stuff as well, post game relaunches and all that sort of stuff. So that's there as well, but it does again make it a weird idea of like, reviews are just in this super weird space because, they're a holdover from a time when, the internet wasn't as big, magazine publications were the big thing, and that's where you went to get your reviews from and all that sort of stuff. And then the internet started coming up, and this is before the time when like streaming and video was a prominent thing on the internet, so you would still go for the written reviews and all that sort of stuff, similar to like magazines and all that sort of stuff. So you would have a good authoritative voice to be like, okay, here's what I want to hear from this about this game and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the rise of influencers, hobby video game writers, and people of that nature have kind of diluted the field of reviews in the sense that like reviews are just everywhere,
Right.
depending on like what exactly you're looking for, essentially. So there's really not a whole lot of just like the authoritative voices anymore. It's because everything is just so kind of out there. It's just an ocean of reviews and voices that you have to wade through to find something that you're like, okay, I kind of vibe with this person, so I guess I'll just like read what they put out. But then even then you're like kind of essentially making like an echo chamber, so you don't really understand like what does this person think, or like why does this person think this about this game, why does this person think this about this game, like what are like these criticisms that could be levied against this game and all that sort of stuff. It's a weird field, and I don't know if there's necessarily like a right or wrong answer to fix this, because like I don't think you necessarily just like abolish game reviews wholeheartedly, because I don't think that's going to be a thing.
No, what I was gonna say is like the internet has definitely like democratized who can write a game review, and especially like in recent years, it's become much easier to like get a platform to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not to say that's a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing.
Right.
And circling a little bit back to the like aggregate sites, and once again, things I saw on Twitter. There was an interaction that I saw again recently, and I forgot it might have been about Elden Ring too.
Well, the
But
sequel to Elden Ring?
I know, it's already been announced. Woo!
Whoa!
And somebody was like yelling in the replies. It was like a screenshot of OpenCritic or whatever, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Breath of the Wild is the most overrated game to ever exist." And like the guy who started OpenCritic's like, "Yeah, so Breath of the Wild's not for me, but that's the thing is it's not for me, and it might not be for you either, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game." And like he like came in with like a really nuanced like thought process about this, was try to like talk this guy down of just like blasting a game wholeheartedly on Twitter. And it's like, huh, wouldn't have expected that from a guy who did like an aggregate site, but here we are.
Right.
But yeah, that was an interesting interaction. He's just like, yeah, so not for you, That's okay. Not for me either. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Like, huh. All right. I don't know. I mean, it's I think that this is something that you and I could both agree on, maybe. Um Video games and video game players are very driven by nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is a sense of nostalgia to like game reviews in general.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh man, we get to go do this thing that we've done forever. Um, but it doesn't really have as much of a purpose anymore. It's just kind of a we've always done it this way thing.
Especially because, the original idea behind reviews is like, all right, we need to tell people whether or not you should spend money on this.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of not necessarily the case anymore.
Well, now it's also like this company is paying a lot of money for me to do this review and say that it's good, so you'll spend money on it. Yay!
I mean, that doesn't happen nearly as much as people would like to tell you, but
It doesn't, but it does happen some.
um, it just becomes a thing to just use as for argumentative sake. Like, one of the things I liked when my job was doing reviews is that we did unscored reviews.
Yes.
Where at the end we gave you positives and negatives about the game.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to score it though. You have to read the article and see if it's good or not. If you want to get a too long didn't read, you read the positives and negatives about it. But even then, that's not going to tell you the whole story.
Right.
And I think that's a way that I think a lot of publications and outlets should be going towards. Is just like get away from review scores.
Yeah, because they don't mean anything.
They don't, and they just tell you a very small story of what that review is. Like even like just like if a game gets a 9, like okay, sure, you would assume that means it's very good. But what does that 9 mean to another game that's in a different genre or just like a completely different game altogether that's also a 9? Does that mean they're the same game? Does that mean they have the same exact qualifications? Does that mean, you're going to have the same exact experience with them? No.
And it's, in some publications, if it's like a 7 or below, they treat it like it's the worst game that ever existed. So like it's all arbitrary.
It very much is.
Yeah, imagine reading about the game and the positives and negatives. Like, whoa.
No, I'm just gonna scroll to the end and be like, number, okay, cool. Later.
Yeah, I mean, people like to show off their numbers, so.
Who doesn't love a good number?
I mean, I don't like math, so I could do without numbers.
Okay, that's fair. I'll give you that. So like I like the idea of getting away from review scores, but I think those are so entrenched in the like culture.
Yeah.
That it's very hard for a lot of publications to do away with that because, again, that's a thing that drives clicks. So like how do you replace that if you're not going to have review scores? Do you think people are going to stick there and read the whole thing?
Right.
And that's a bold gamble to try and make. Because you don't know.
Right. I mean, people aren't really known for reading a whole lot nowadays on like the Twitters and stuff.
Reading very difficult.
It is very difficult.
That's for true. But yeah, it's a hard problem to try and fix because it's so ingrained in the culture and everything that you try and get away from it. Like, who knows what the ramifications for you are going to be. Something else that I think was interesting that came out of the whole Elden Ring stuff was the idea that game got a lot of very positive reviews, and like not taking away from the game or anything, or saying those reviews aren't without merit or anything. But a lot of those reviews were written by people or done by people who were enthusiasts of Souls games.
Right.
And
that would look very different than like me writing one.
Right. So there was way fewer people who were writing reviews for that game that were like newcomers to the series and all that sort of stuff. So it's hard to find like the differences between reviews in that particular instance of like, okay, if I'm coming to this for the first time, like how like what would I look to as a new player? Like, who do I need to go to find people who've played this as a new person have that experience with it, rather than the 90% of the reviews who are like are ingratiated in the culture of the Souls genre and everything, that they they know the ins and outs of it, but they're not coming to it from like a new player's perspective. And that kind of brings up the idea of like who should be assigned reviews and everything. Do you give a review a game to a person who knows the ins and outs of that genre, that series and everything, or do you give it to someone who has no knowledge of it and see what happens? Again, it's a hard question to answer, because on both hands, I have two hands holding up here.
You have two hands? What?
Yeah, two hands.
Wow.
There is worthiness to both reviews, because if you're someone who likes that genre and everything and likes those games, you're going to want to see what someone who likes those games and that genre has to say about it. Although more than likely you're already going to be like preconceived to have an idea that, oh, I already want this game. Whereas if you are someone who's new, you're probably going to gravitate towards someone who has that same experience that you are going to have, of like, okay, this is new to me and everything. You're not going to necessarily resonate as well to someone who like knows the ins and outs of everything, because you don't have those preconceived experiences. You don't have the ideas of what the genre is and how that series plays and everything. So I think both are good, but it's the idea of like, how do you pull this off and have it make sense?
And like with a day one review on a big publication, like it doesn't make sense to do both.
Right.
Because how would you promote that?
Exactly.
But like ultimately both would be the ideal situation and something like that, of like somebody who's entrenched in that kind of information and someone who's not at all.
And the thing is like, no publication is going to want to pay two different people to to play a game.
Nope.
Which is the sad thing about that. There was an interesting take on this when Dark Souls 2 came out. GameSpot did a thing where they gave, they did the two review thing. They gave, the one review to someone who had already, had played Dark Souls 1. They had an idea of what these games were. They also gave a copy to someone who hadn't played the games before. And the idea that came out of it was that, one score was a 9 out of 10, which was the person who had knowledge of the series and everything. And the newcomer gave it a 5 out of 10. So big, that's a big jump in score there for just going off score alone.
Right.
But
which
also
is what a lot of people do.
Yes, but also it's it's an interesting dichotomy there of just like, how could a review score differ, or just a review in general differ so much between someone who is experienced with this and someone who's a complete newcomer.
Right.
There's going to be people who would just look at that and be like, okay, well, the newcomer's review doesn't matter because they've not played these games before. I'm going to go to this person because they've obviously played these games before, and that's what I want to gravitate towards. That's the experience that I've had, so they're going to be more right in this situation than this person. That's going to be a problem that's going to come up. But I think that experiment, like it's obvious that there hasn't been a lot of those experiments done since then.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a good idea because, like, you get those different experiences because everybody's going to come into games with, a whole bunch of differences in terms of, like, what games they've played in their past, how they play games, how much time they can devote to games, what they get out of games, like, what's their experience that they get out of each and every game that they play. All of that is different. So, like, having these different ideas of reviews, even just from a singular publication, so have multiple reviews, I think it's a good idea because, you're going to give more people an opportunity to see exactly, like, what exactly is a game giving me. And I think mostly the idea of, the multiple review thing is kind of more embellished or embedded into like podcasts and video stuff where you can have multiple people from a publication come together and just like sit around and chat about a game and talk about their experiences. in a, more casual, free-flowing type of format than necessarily a review would give you, because there,
Right.
you can bounce off ideas off each other. You can have, debates and all that sort of stuff. You can have just casual conversation about, mechanics and story and blah, 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 in a way that it makes it a lot easier to do so than just like in a singular review from one person
Mm-hmm.
and one person's point of view, and that's it.
I mean, it makes sense to me.
Well, I'm glad it makes sense to someone.
Well, I mean, like we don't necessarily always play the exact same games or have the exact same experience with games in
Yeah.
terms of like you've played more of those type games than I have.
Mm-hmm.
I played one, got super mad at it, almost broke a controller, and never again. Except for I'm gonna play the Final Fantasy one because that's stupid and it has easy mode. But mainly because it's stupid. Um, but like you have more experience with that than I do. But we could still like have conversations about those type games and get different perspectives on it. And I think it would be a more well-rounded and nuanced take on a game than like here's a game that has a 95. Okay, sure, cool. What does
Right.
that mean?
So, like, okay, let's put this into an example for people to understand that relates more to us.
Examples?
Example.
I love examples.
I know. A month ago, we talked about Super Mario 64.
Yes, we did. You
If
don't
we-
like it.
If we had both done singular reviews of that game, by
Yep.
that I mean, obviously, the traditional format of just, writing individually, us writing stuff down about that game and blah, blah, blah. Here's what we think about it, blah, 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 and assigning scores to it.
Mm-hmm.
We would have very differing ideas of what that game is.
Very different.
Very differing scores. Whereas, when we come together for the podcast and everything, we're able to talk about those differences, able to have interesting conversations about those, be able to kind of enlighten each other on our various viewpoints. Obviously, we played that game together, so we both had an idea of like what we were going to say going into it and like how the conversations would flow and all that sort of stuff. But we're able to bring more of an idea of how that game can be very different for people in that conversation, rather than if we had done two separate reviews
Right.
of that game. And I think that in essence is a weird way to show like how reviews have evolved
Mm-hmm.
over the years, is that I think a lot of it now kind of comes down to, you're still going to be able to find good reviews out there. Like, you're still going to be able to find people who you agree with. You're going to seek out those voices in particular. And
You respect what they have to say about
yeah,
games.
I think that's just going to be a common thing regardless. I mean, that's the thing, for every walk of life, for every media out there, whether it's
Right.
video games, movies,
Books.
or even stuff like
Those still exist.
yes, stuff like sports. You're going to gravitate towards certain sports writers, for like your certain teams or athletes and all that sort of stuff. So like that stuff's still going to be there, whether or not they stay the same over the next decade or so, or eventually they fall apart, they die off, or they evolve into something else entirely. We can't say for sure, because reviews have been around for 50 years now in the video game
Yeah.
industry, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's a hard process to to change. But I think the idea of like getting more interesting ideas, thoughtful conversation, different experiences kind of comes around the idea of just getting different people together to talk about games. And not just having a singular voice be just that one authoritative voice. Whereas now you get kind of like, you get multiple authoritative voices. You get a gaggle of authoritative voices to talk about games. And in a sense, you're still kind of going towards I'm going to go seek out these people now
Mm-hmm.
to see how they feel about a certain game and all that sort of stuff, because I like their opinions. Whether or not that means they're from a specific publication, or they're just, people who stream on YouTube or Twitch or have a podcast, it is what it is. Like, the industry's changed in a whole lot of ways.
Are we a gaggle? The two of us? Are we a gaggle?
I think we're under the gaggle limit.
Dang it! What if we include the boys? Does that make us a gaggle?
I mean, I'm gonna search gaggle.
All
and
right.
see if there is a numerical connotation to it. Gaggle is a flock of geese, in case you were unaware, or a disorderly or noisy group of people, which I think that's podcasters in general.
Yeah. So probably a gaggle.
Yeah, I think we're a gaggle.
We're a
We,
small gaggle.
we could be a gaggle.
Um. God.
I didn't mean to derail that by just saying the word gaggle, but
No.
I was trying to sound smart, and apparently I just wasn't smart.
Mean that. I just think it's a funny word. And I had something that I thought was insightful that I was gonna say, and then it just went out my ear. So
I just goofed on you, and then you're just like, "Oh no, thoughts
Gaggle?
and opinions, gaggle."
Oh man. Yeah. What was I? Oh, I was gonna say that like one of my favorite game reviews that I've ever read in my entire life is the one from like 82 or 83 in Hustler magazine.
You know, the quintessential publication for video games.
Right? Where they're just completely dunking on, I don't remember, it's Custer's Revenge or it was Beat 'em and Eat 'em, one of those games. There's
Deservedly so.
There's like, this game sucks. Even we like sexy stuff, and this is the worst. This isn't sexy. This isn't fun. Who is this for? I'm like, dang. Hustler went in hard on you guys. Like when Hustler is telling you that you're terrible, like yikes. It was a very good review. 10 out of 10. Would read again.
Oh man.
I mean, they were not having it. Maybe it was X-Man. It might have been X-Man.
I mean, none of those games are good.
No, none of them are good. We played them. They're terrible.
They're very bad.
They're very bad. But I mean, like I said, when Hustler is in there dunking on you, like oof. But also, yeah, you know, the definitive source for video game reviews, Hustler. But you know, I'm doing other not as quickly as I would like because I've been super busy, but I've been going through that stupid magazine from 1999 and 2000. Remember?
Yes, the wrestling magazine, clearly.
The wrestling Esquire video
Maxim
game
magazine.
Maxim,
It's not Maxim, to be fair, but it's basically knockoff Maxim with wrestling and video games.
And very anti-Pokemon. Like,
yeah, that's the late 90s, early 2000s for you.
Aggressively against Pokemon and anything cute. But like the reviews in that are just so bizarrely written. And I'm trying to think of like, is there an equivalent to that kind of thing now? Like I know that heck, what was that guy's name? The guy who was maybe Australian. People loved him for a while.
Steve Irwin.
Yes.
Crocodile Dundee.
People should always love him. Anyway, he did like animated game reviews and he was kind of like
Yahtzee?
Yeah. So he had like some kind of like salty opinions that were like edgy at times.
I mean, you could have another conversation about how that spawned the I have to be very mad about video games subgenre of YouTube videos.
Correct. And so I'm wondering, like, is that the equivalent of like that magazine's reviews are like that subgenre of like angry YouTube videos?
Yeah, I guess. But like, I think that also brings up another weird point is that like, if you look back at the history of like magazine video game reviews, like obviously the big games got like, you know, a couple page spreads, I should say.
Yeah.
And, you know, a good amount of like writing done about them. But like, think about like some random B game.
Like
that
a
you
paragraph at most.
Yeah, a paragraph at most.
If they got that.
And that was it. That was your authoritative voice on that game. Like if you were to do that today, you would be eaten alive for trying to even attempt that because they'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
This isn't enough to tell me about this game.
Nope.
You just wrote a paragraph.
Yeah,
What are you,
that's
some
it.
lazy expletive? Like, what's wrong with you? I think that's what we need to bring back. Paragraph reviews.
Oh boy.
One paragraph, score, that's it.
It's
Call it a
harder
day.
than one would think to like write a paragraph review. Like That had to have been pretty hard to do to get like whatever information you had to do with one dang paragraph.
Or you just don't care.
Or you just don't care. One or the other.
I wonder.
Um,
Keep talking. I want to see if I can find a one paragraph review of something.
well, like one of the other things that that magazine had that I don't see very often anymore, and maybe because I'm not looking in the right spots, but it would have like games that are similar to the game that they're currently reviewing.
Yeah,
Like
that was
in
also
a
a thing.
chart,
Uh-huh.
and it would be like, yeah, like this one has this kind of score, and like the visuals are this, and the gameplay is this, and but then you had like stupid snarky stuff written in there, and like I don't know, talking about Claire Redfield's butt or something, because that's the kind of magazine that was.
Yeah.
um I don't know, being sexist and racist at the same time was just a good old day for them at the time.
I mean, to be fair, that magazine's very bad.
Very bad. It is a very bad magazine. Everything about it is bad. But yeah, the review system is it quite wild that they're like, oh yes, let's compare. And some of them like are not really comparable, so I'm not sure why they put them together other than like they felt like they needed to. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking up?
I found an old issue of EGM on the Internet Archive. I'm trying to see if they have any like weird
Paragraph,
just paragraph
reviews?
reviews. There's a lot of paragraph previews,
Oh.
which I wonder if like previews are by and large a thing of the past now. Like, you still have
Yeah.
some previews here and there, but like a lot of it's gone.
Yep.
Like, is that going to be the way the reviews go at some point, where they're just like you see a handful out each year, and that's it?
It's a good question.
So EGM's weird, I guess, because they'd have multiple people review games
Yes.
and give it different scores. Where their formula for this issue from July 1998 is like one reviewer gives it like a lengthier review, and the other three are just paragraphs.
Huh.
So let me see if I can find a game that would be interesting to hear about, if it's on here, because you don't know.
No.
No,
I know nothing.
you know nothing.
I know nothing. I'm just looking at Maxwell being a super cutie pants.
Okay, let's talk about Gran Turismo.
Gran
That's
Turismo.
That's a video game.
That is a video game. You're correct.
This game got 9. Oops, I changed the page.
You killed it.
I killed
We
it.
can't talk about Gran Turismo anymore.
This is not high res because I can't read this. Oh, there it goes. It's loading in. It's got 9.5, 9.5, 9.0, 9.0. Best features, just about everything. Worst feature, mostly Japanese car names and models, which, all right.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
It is the game of the month, by the way. So here you go. This is
All right.
the first review, which is about a lengthy paragraph.
Okay.
I'm going to read these verbatim for you. Ignoring the hype that surrounds the enormous number of dream cars, the equally prolific track options, the incredible graphics, and the beautiful animation, at its heart, this is a game that is tuned virtually to perfection. Everything seems to handle just right. Powerful cars feel like untamed beasts barely kept in check, while smaller sportsters allow you to throw them around bends with scant disregard for the laws of physics. The cars respond with over and understeer, just as you'd expect them to, in a way that no other game has managed to convey. This just isn't a quick fix racer, though. After getting your thrills in the arcade mode, you can switch to the more complex meat and potato side of things, the simulation mode. Buy yourself a clapped up old banger, take it to the Sunday races and begin your career. Win some money, upgrade your jalopy, and eventually find yourself in a position to buy a GTR spec Acura NXX capable of snapping knicker elastic at 100 paces. That's a phrase.
What?
If I have any quibbles with the thing, it's the overly fussy way that you have to earn a racing license to compete in different events. It's a great idea, but the procedure is a little long-winded. Aside from this is wonderful. Gran Turismo really is the definitive racer. So do you feel like you got an earnest way of understanding what that game is about in that paragraph?
I mean, I think it's about racing.
All right, well, let's listen to the second one, which is a lot shorter paragraph.
Okay.
Get used to this quote, because you're going to hear it a lot. Gran Turismo is the best racing game of all time, which that's not true anymore.
Woo!
GT is loaded with so much depth, so many options, so many cars, so much variety. It literally,
I thought you said death.
yeah, it's also death. It just literally destroys anything that's come before it.
Literally destroys.
Everything about the game is just about perfect, except for the lame fact that many cars still have their Japanese names and likenesses, because that's what they're named are. Aside from that, however, GT just rocks. Do you feel like you got an honest review of the game from that paragraph?
No. This person's just angry about Japanese names.
I guess so. All right, let's read the third one.
Literally destroys or obliterates, and also like it rocks. Like, what does that mean?
Look,
the first one was way better.
Well, it was also longer.
Yeah.
GT is arguably the best racing game out right now. Don't forget Need for Speed 3, in case you forgot. I'm amazed at the number of cars they packed in this title, over 160. They're not cookie cutter either. They all handle differently, not to mention being real. I can race my CRX. Very cool. Imagine the high adrenaline gameplay of Daytona distilled into a realistic contemporary racing sim. A darn good mix. There's just not enough space to give this one its due praise. Do you feel like you got an accurate representation of this video game from that review?
No.
Which, by the way, you know, the last two reviews were similar, right? You would think.
Right.
There was a 0.5 difference in the score.
Okay.
And then finally, the last one. As good as Gran Turismo is, I love it dearly. I've got to complain about a few facets of this brilliant game.
Okay.
First, getting the different licenses is annoying. I'd rather have access to more things much quicker. What if you had, like, microtransactions?
Oh God, no.
Also, there should be more American cars.
Oh my God.
I have an Acura Integra, and I'm disappointed they only have the Japanese-styled one in the game. Despite my gripes, every racing fan should almost feel obliged to buy this game. Do you feel you should buy this game off of that review?
Why are they so upset about Japanese cars?
I don't know.
They do. It's a Japanese game, right?
Apparently not. You would think, because that was very much, you know, the thing.
Oh boy. No. Like I said, these people just seem salty about it being Japanese.
But this was the way reviews were at the time.
No, you're right. You're right. I just
like I'm not saying that to you, but yeah.
I learned more about what that person drives personally than I did about the game.
All right. Well, okay.
Okay.
Let's listen to this review for Grand Theft Auto.
Oh boy.
The first one.
Oh boy.
Let's see if these short. I'm not gonna read the long one. I'm gonna read the shorter ones for you and see if you feel like they have an accurate representation of the original Grand Theft Auto.
Okay.
Bringing new meaning to politically incorrect gaming, Grand Theft Auto may become a sleeper hit. While challenging at first, using the overhead view to execute the mini missions turned out to be rather cool. I really got into the ambiance of the game, especially the urban atmosphere. The attention to detail, music, language, etc. helps a lot. A map option would have been nice, but no biggie. Action adventure fans will eat it up. 6.5.
They don't explain their opening line at all.
No.
No.
They don't explain why it'll become a sleeper hit, why is politically incorrect gaming. But again, also, it's a paragraph, so, like, you gotta say something flashy and then just be like, I can't explain this.
Right. Like, you're just saying words. They don't mean anything.
Obviously, like, you know, reviews have changed in the, 22 years that this magazine came out?
Yeah.
So, like, obviously, you're not gonna have reviews like this anymore. That's why paragraph reviews like this just don't exist anymore.
Right.
Even though they should. Let's bring back paragraph reviews again.
Oh, God.
But yeah, I'll read you this other one because it's a lower score. It's the lowest score I think out of all of them. First funsies. Let's face it, this game's hype is based 100% on its so-called controversial and mature content. Without the swearing and the criminal activities, GTA would have very little draw. The action does have an old-school arcade feel to it, which is a plus. And I have to admit, I had fun carjacking and cruising around the city. GTA is definitely worth checking out, if for nothing more than seeing how naughty this game can get. 5.0. Now, does that tell you... I mean, obviously, it tells you there's problems with the game.
Yeah.
But does that explain why it's a 5?
No. I mean... No.
But this is the authoritative voice in 1998. This would be what you'd go to. I mean, it's one of them, I should say. It's not the authoritative voice, but I mean, EGM was one of the biggest.
One of the biggest, yes.
And this is just how they did reviews. You get multiple scores, and then you would just have to read this and kind of figure out, do I average all these scores up and that tells me how it is? do I just look to one person and be like, okay, I agree with what they say and that's it? Paragraph reviews were weird. And it's like, even though I'm joking, it's a good thing they're gone, because you just cannot tell people like what a game's about, what your rating is about in 3 to 5 sentences.
But then you also end up with like the echo chamber there too, of like, oh, I agree with this person says, so I'm gonna go read their paragraph reviews on every single game, and like that
totally.
that builds that. And
even though I think like they're trying to like circumvent that by having multiple review scores, but
they are, but
you can still fall into that by just being like, okay, well, I'm just gonna seek out this person, see what they say, and okay, Reddit, all right, time to go to the Walmart, time to go to the Kmart. Spend by $39.99, because that's how much video games were at the time.
Sam Goody.
The Sam Goody, and pick up my video game. Sam Goody sell video games?
Sam Goody is where I got video games when I was a kiddo.
Huh. I don't remember ever getting games from there. But also, I think Sam Goody like left my area in like 2000.
My brother worked at a Sam Goody.
So they probably just like, they were just in the music, and then they're like, we're out of here. See you later. You want your weird anime and music? Here you go. All right, we're out. Goodbye.
I think they were on cue before that, and then they became Sam Goody.
Well, why were they waiting in line?
Yeah. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know, but that's where you got games in my hometown. You could get some at Walmart, but not a whole lot. And then there was like the KB in the mall.
Yeah.
But we didn't have like a game store or anything.
We had an EB.
Whoa, aren't you fancy?
I know, then it turned into GameStop. Obviously.
We didn't have either of those things. My hometown still doesn't have a dedicated
obviously, like
game
store. It's not. We don't have one here.
Yeah.
Like, you have to travel for it, but like that was a thing in the mall. Let's go to EB.
You would have had to drive like 45 minutes to get to one. Maybe. I don't even remember if there was one in 45 minutes away. You might have had to go to Memphis.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah. Podunk.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw indeed. That's why the mall there looks like zombie apocalypse. Like legit just Dead Rising happened in my hometown. That mall's a mess.
Yeah. I can believe it.
Rip.
Well, regardless, reviews are weird, in a weird space, in a weird spot, and they're weird.
Yeah.
They've always kind of just been weird.
Well, and I mean, like, some games I just will not read a review on. Like, honestly, anything that's Musou related, I will not read a review on, because I can guarantee most of them are going to be mostly bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just not a genre that people really like that much.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, oh, no, I have to press these buttons and then I take on thousands of dudes and I'm tired of doing that after a while. It's like, cool. All right. Fine. But, like, those never, ever, ever get good reviews. I wonder, like, probably the highest one's even Hyrule Warriors. That would be my guess anyway.
Yeah, probably. I will say, I think another kind of problem with reviews is that the context of them means that you really can't get super in-depth discussion about a video game, because a lot of them have to be like, we can't talk about spoilers because the publishers did not want us to talk about spoilers. So you can't really get that in a review, obviously. But obviously, if you're going to review, you don't want to be spoiled for a game. Like, I get that idea. But there's a whole lot of stuff like around like, oh, I want to talk about this part of the story, but I can't talk about this part of the story, so I'm going to tiptoe around it and make, allusions to it, but I can't really talk about it because I'm not allowed to, so it's a hard problem to fix.
Okay, so Dynasty Warriors 8 got a 68. Hyrule Warriors, for Wii U and Switch, and Age of Calamity are like 76, 78. And one more thing I'm going to check. get to hear my fast type. 74 for Fire Emblem Warriors, which is arguably one of the better ones.
What about the Persona one?
Oh, right. I didn't think about that one.
Because I bet that one probably got like better reviews, I would assume.
83.
Yeah.
But even still, like for like video game numbers, those are typically like bad numbers. So, or they're at least falling into the yellow in the Metacritic, which whoa. So yeah, I will never ever read reviews for a Musou game. I don't read them for Otome games either.
Well, it's because probably there's not a whole lot of people actually reviewing Otome games, unfortunately.
Yeah, the definitive person for Otome reviews is Otome Kitten.
Yeah.
Yeah, Otome Kitten's pretty good though. I've only been steered wrong a few times. And even then, like, I can't really be mad about it.
Yeah. I think either way, they're going to be in a weird spot for the next couple of years. They're going to just continue to be in that weird spot because this publication is still going to want to put out reviews day one, regardless of what happens and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know the way to fix this.
No, I don't either.
That's not my job.
That's above our pay grade, man.
That's above our pay grade, but we'll just keep doing doing things the way we do it. And I think that's a pretty decent way to talk about video games and review context, which is kind of what we do. So
we'll be our gaggle of
we'll be our gaggle of people.
Gaggle of people who make reviews here at the podcast.
And I think this is kind of probably going to be the way things are just going to continue to go.
Yeah.
This is going to trend more this way unless some other new phenomenon pops up and changes the way we look at video game coverage. So there's that.
I want to tell you though, I don't know if it's because of the people that I follow or don't follow or whatever, or if just I've been super busy. I've yet to see actually a single review of Elden Ring so far. So I don't actually know how well it's doing or not.
Well, if you want to, let's go to an aggregate review site.
Let's do it.
It is averaged at 96 on OpenCritic.
Okay.
So it's gotten a lot of positive reviews.
I mean, it's no Bustafellows.
I mean, what is?
I'll finish that one day. Yo.
Either way, do you have any more thoughts on this, or do you want to wrap this up?
I got nothing, man.
All right.
Be nice to game reviewers though, because most of them don't get paid enough to do what they're doing.
And
so
probably very tired.
Very, very tired. So
and
just
have a nap.
Don't be mean to them.
Yeah, it's true. Well, that's gonna do it for this here podcast. That went longer than I was anticipating, but that's cool.
Yay!
That is very fine.
What? You mean we talk a lot?
I know, it's very shocking.
When does that ever happen?
Very shocking. But if you'd like more from us, head on over to seasonalanimecheckup.com or sac.cool, where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Jared Now Watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. Speaking of, hey!
Ha!
Non-scored reviews on the website.
Woo-woo!
If you'd like more from Anladium, go to anladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter and TikTok at Anime Checkup. You can buy our books, One Shiny Moment, A Critical Analysis of Love, Life, Sunshine, and Hot Tubs and Pac-Man on Amazon.com. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buy us a slice of pizza, get access to unedited versions of the podcast early, and a whole wealth of bonus content as well.
Contribute to Game Boy having the kitty tooth fairy visit him.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, we'll talk about something.
Yeah, something.
We'll figure it out and we'll reconvene and have more chitty chats.
What?
With our gaggle of people.
Our gaggle.